I'm Anika Wulff and I'm a certified organic grower in the Lockyer Valley, Queensland. So tonight's call is designed to be a casual Q&A conversation following on from our three-part series. Presumably you've been sent it and you've had a chance to watch at least one of the recordings. Like if you haven't, it doesn't matter, no judgment. We know lives are busy, but if you by chance feel a little bit lost, that's totally okay. I think it's rite of passage when you're learning about this, that we all sometimes feel a little bit lost on what we're learning because this is a completely new paradigm. So I really loved how last week that Charlie Starkey mentioned that this is Web 3.0 and it's coming for us, like it or not. And before we know it, there'll be Web 4.0 or 5.0. So we may as well get in and take a look. I was introduced to Grow from my friend Jen, actually, and she messaged me one day and said, hey, I've got this thing. We've got to help the farmers more. I've got something for you. We've got to help the farmers more. And I was like, sounds good, because I'm pretty sure that day it was one of those days where like irrigation had burst, a tire had broken down, there was machinery breaking down, there was problems with staff, we're dealing with natural disasters, there's probably no money in the bank. And I was thinking, okay, that sounds great. I think we can take a chat on that. So we did get on the call and Jen started to talk to me about three things, and it was projects, blockchain, and nodes. And I didn't really know what she was talking about, but the node idea to me was like, that sounds like a pretty good off-farm asset, and farmers need off-farm assets. You need multiple income streams because things go wrong, like they just do, and I'm pretty sure all farmers can relate. And so I really jumped in on the node ownership. I thought this is really cool. If I can have an income stream over here, completely independent to the farm, it's just going to give me a little bit of security for when things go wrong. And funnily enough, things did go wrong after we purchased our first node. We had a flood, which wiped out 70% of our sweet potatoes. And then the same year, we had a hailstorm that wiped out what we had grown to mitigate that financial loss actually got wiped out by hail. So it was return on investment 0 times 2 in 1 year. It was a pretty solid hit, and it was nice to know that we had other things in the background working for us. And I think over time, and I've said this before, I came for the node, but I'm staying for the community. So I know that farmers would feel the same as how I felt, where you actually do feel pretty isolated sometimes. You know, problems are big. You're dealing with them a lot by yourself, or you know, you have a team, but you're the leader, and you have to solve problems constantly. And sometimes it feels like no one cares. And you know, because if my tomatoes get destroyed, someone else can just go produce tomatoes and replace mine, and no one's ever going to know. And so what I've realized with the Grow community is that people really do care. And you've got people on all sides of the supply chain caring about the food system. And to me, this is why I want to stay. I think that it's really exciting to have this infrastructure and the brains behind and the heart behind this creation. And it's an offering and an opportunity for us all to get involved. So lean in, ask questions. Questions are excellent because sometimes we haven't thought of everything. And so please ask questions in the chat or put your hand up. We've got Neil on the call tonight. Neil is our expert. He knows all things. He can answer all the curly questions. He's going to take us through some of the questions that have been submitted last week. And then we're going to turn the recording off and go through some numbers, which are super exciting. And it actually allows you to see this opportunity. So Neil, thank you for joining us. Nice and early for you once again. Let's get started on the questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anika. I feel like you could probably lead this start to finish, nose to tail. Now you've heard the spiels. You probably know as much as I do. And I think that's the great thing about Grow as a community. You know, we share knowledge, and it's in that exchange of knowledge sharing that we are greater together. So as Anika mentioned, there were some great questions that we didn't get to last week, and I'd love to start off by answering some of those questions today. I will mention that for some of you, who I don't recognize. I see some names I don't recognize. I am a farmer. I still own and operate a smallholder farm. I've been part of Grow since its early inauguration. And I'm here not because I'm trying to bring a new shiny object in, or because I want a new banner at a conference, to proclaim technology. I'm here because I truly and honestly want to build a new economy so that we can start to fix the broken agri-food system upstream to downstream. And the only way I've figured out how to do that is by leveraging what Grow offers. And so my experience has been ecological, meaning I spent a lot of time in the field putting systems together. It's also technological. I've worked with ag tech as it's been an onslaught into agriculture. And today I really see Grow as really just the bridge between tradition and technology. And we can do that more effectively where we have some ownership, we have some solidarity, and we have some mutually beneficial rewards and outcomes that can come from that. Most importantly, being good, nutritious food that's going to nourish the planet. So a lot of the questions on the economic side that come down the pipeline landed into one question that we didn't get to last week, which is, do banks recognize on the decentralized finance side of our project the Grow token? Do they recognize that as a true instrument of economic value? Is that something you can actually put on your balance sheet? And while I say the financial system is in flux over decentralized finance, that's probably the best term to use, they are recognizing these instruments. Now, you can't exchange a Grow token for an Aussie dollar. They're not parity, they're not one for one, and there's no foreign exchange platform that's dealing with decentralized finance and traditional finance in that way. So you can't go into your bank and say, hey, I've got X number of Grow tokens and I'd love a line of credit that's extended on that. However, Grow as a project itself does have some financial instruments that will offer that capability. So the infrastructure that runs the blockchain, it really is what makes blockchains different from everything else, more secure, more sovereign, et cetera, and so forth. Those are the nodes that Anika mentioned really quickly. She had no idea what they were when she was first told about. Those can actually be appreciating assets that do sit on a financial ledger and that are recognized as a piece of software that can add to either your net worth statement or add to your valuation of your business that do get extended at traditional finance entities. The Grow token can play into your overall net worth capability, but it's not leverageable. But it is got value, and I want you to do your own homework a little bit on what's happening today in our financial industry. We've got stable coins. So there's more traditional finance entities out there running towards what's called a stable coin. It's another decentralized finance tool. They're looking at digital assets. They're really trying to figure out this world that we're already working in and building. The beautiful thing about it is that the decentralized model that we've built won't allow government oversight or regulations to come in and centralize what we have built in decentralizing. So the Grow token it's got value. We want it to continue to appreciate in value in our ecosystem because it means you use less Grow tokens in the exchange of goods and services. But it isn't meant to be flipped back out into the fiat system because that just continues to feed the Aussie dollar or the fiat system, in my case, the Canadian dollar. And that system is fundamentally broken. So the Grow token is a wonderful tool inside our ecosystem. It's got a lot of power. Now that can be used to build other financial mechanisms, such as digital assets. And those are recognized in all financial models. So whether that is ecological credits, carbon credits, water credits, biodiversity, whether that's real world asset tokenization, that's something else to do some homework on, something that Grow has the ability to do. We can actually tokenize, which means that we are creating or assigning a digital twin. It's the sort of the easiest way to explain it, a digital twin to that real world entity or asset. Call that a metric ton of grain in your bin, call that a cow on your land, call that a acre or hectare of land on your property. These are all assets that can be tokenized, creating the digital version, and that tokenized asset can be leveraged against, can be put towards the valuation of your business, to give your overall pro forma a better diversification, and also could be traded or staked or hedged in the same way many financial instruments can do. So that hopefully can bring some clarity. So we've got the node as an appreciating asset, sits on financial ledger. We've got the Grow token, which is our tool to exchange in goods and services. It appreciates in value, can be utilized in a lot of functions, can be swapped back out. It's not to say it can't. I just continue to encourage everyone to keep it within the system because we're building a new economy. There's no reason to flip it back out. And then we've got the tokenized assets, and whether that is credits or any other real world asset that you have on land. So those are the three sort of financial carriages that are bolted on to our Grow project as a whole. All of it is backed by data, the data coming off of land, the data we're putting into the chain, and the utility. So on a consumer side, the more you're engaging and using and contributing to our community, that utility plays into those three financial instruments, also all appreciating in value. Now, the really cool thing that I want to mention is, unlike a bank, and I'll point fingers at banks all day long, unlike a bank, in the Grow community, what I do today, so if I went in, used my Grow token and purchased some hay off of a producer using my Grow tokens, that actually creates utility and benefit for everyone. If I went to the bank and I got a LOC or an extended line of credit, took some cash, went to that same producer, bought hay with my Canadian dollars, that only benefits the bank and that producer with the hay. It really doesn't benefit anyone else. That's a mind shift, right? And so imagine, when I'm sleeping in Canada, you all in Australia are, creating opportunities, supporting each other, creating resiliency, using the Grow token, these financial instruments, and it's actually benefiting everyone. And then when you're sleeping, I'm doing the same thing in Canada. You wake up and we've got more value, more utility, more functionality. That's how we start to create the breathing room under our collar, and we start to see new outcomes and the financial realities that we're faced with. Can Grow be used in the commodity market space? That's another question that was came out of last week. Absolutely. The short answer is yes. Absolutely. We can use Grow tokens to deal with commodity trading. We can use digital assets to create. The point is that we need to invite those community groups in, and we need to get them thinking to function differently. And so it takes 6-7 conversations to really get them to see why they need to be thinking differently about commodities. Now, I have an issue with the commodity market because I think it's strong-armed our producers as a whole. They're often not associated, don't come from farming, and making decisions on future-looking performas of what grain should be on a global market scale. And so I'd rather them, really start to take a look under the hood, not just the financial layer, but under the hood at Grow to say, hey, the data that is being used in a lot of cases to create those commodity for financial models should be based off of a ledger that is immutable, that isn't manipulated, that isn't scrubbed, that isn't, carving off the lowest common denominator and rounding up or down depending on what they want to see. It's actually using data, and that would change how the commodity market plays, and that would also change how producers could have more of a say in how they can future sell their product. And I think that would start to change the whole conversation. That's what we're doing at Grow. We're actually trying to create different conversations. Continue what you're doing today, start adding Grow in, start creating some diversification, but then we need to shift into leveraging Grow so we can have different conversations. So can it be used in the commodity? Absolutely. Is it going to be hard battle? That's what we're building. We're here to have paradigm shifts, and I started, to really engage with Grow and build Grow a little bit because I've been a black sheep in the agriculture market my whole life. I've focused on financial diversification through ecological outcomes, really doubling down on hydrology and system change at the field level, croppers and livestock handling and the integration of that. Land capacity, I talk a lot about that. We can get more out of our land than we think we can. We've been trained and educated by the big ag, big food model that we need to do things a certain way as producers. And we've created a system, a cogwheel, that we can't find our way out of unless we have a new solution. And that's what Grow's really offered me. So I was, if I had this 10 years ago when I started building my consultancy, it would have been a heyday. I would have loved it. I'm 10 years on and I'm going, oh man, I can still bring this to I no longer have a consultancy, but I can still bring this to the market space, and we can do the things that I always hoped we could, which is really start to shift those conversations. So financial instruments that can be recognized in the financial world, and so you can actually diversify your balance sheets today. You can actually leverage that. I would recommend reach out to our community if you can't find anyone, but go find an accountant that understands decentralized finance and all the components that go along with that, as much as they do traditional finance. Because having that knowledge base is only going to behoove you. And then continue to look at ways where Grow as an instrument in our community can continue to ensure that you have less resilience on the Aussie dollar and everything you're doing there. So those are the two questions that came out of last week there. Please come off of mute if you'd like me to dive deeper into any of those questions. I don't see anything else. I'm just pulling up the chat box here. Awesome. The other question that was thrown out between last week and this week, I was speaking with a couple of Aussies where, what is it that you've actually built? Now, I've put presentations together, and I'm talking about the applications, and maybe we don't go into the application scenarios as much, but I thought what I'd do is just explain that really quickly and share my screen if I can pull this up here. So for some of you, this might be the first time you're seeing this. For others, you may have seen this before. But really, Grow is the foundation. It's a layer one. And one of the co-founders of Grow right now is actually over in Belgium. And we just, speaking of a paradigm shift, there was a large conglomerate. I won't name names at the moment. We'll have a PR statement coming out about this, but there's a large entity that just said yes to Grow and said, yeah, we're ready for the change. We see what you're doing. We want to be part of this. In fact, we're ready to function in a different way, and both from ecological credits to net zero to really understanding how the data can play into better understanding the nutritional components of food, the cascading flow all the way down. Where it started was with Farm Tracer. So Farm Tracer was our first application that was built. It actually started with Will, one of the co-founders, and his best friend as a Web 2, just a software platform to trace from field to plate the criteria of meat. They're a ranching operation. It's expanded into much more than that, and so we can do everything from paddock to plate in any market space or supply shed that needs to be traced. The beauty of it is that it really is data that is ledgered in an immutable way, meaning that it behooves or benefits both parties. So the downstream recipients of that data, call it this big CPG that's playing ball with us, and Austin, in this case, his farm operation or any producer. It changes the conversation, and it gives a lot more trust and transparency on what's going on from field all the way to paddock. Now it's complicated. Every supply shed's a bit different, so it's a bespoke application, and it takes a while to set up, but it's really, really neat. And so we're starting to get into other crops, in potatoes and stone orchards, and we're getting into grain, and we've got cattle, and we've got dairy on there, and so it's a very usable, traceable traceability application that really sort of underpins everything that the industry is looking for. Can we trace the data from field to paddock? Can we give more confidence to the consumer? Can we safeguard the information for the producer? And can we create some financial benefit for everyone involved? The answer is yes, all the way through. Then we get into ecological credits, which is slightly different, but we had a lot of ask. I spent a number of years building registries and being very involved in how we qualify projects for this ecological world and carbon credits in particular. And whether you believe in it or not, or think it's a bit of a hoax, there is opportunity for those to recognize financial outcomes from collecting data. It's the same data that we use up here in Farm Tracer. We just partition it in a different way. And so we can actually create value stacked propositions for this data. What we do, though, we're not a registry. We call ourselves the unregistry. We don't subscribe to the world leading methodology companies out there that create bureaucracy and actually take up a lot of the funding that should go back to the producers for doing the good work to either sequester the carbon or build the biodiversity or improve the water quality. We come alongside the producer, we help you design this project, we get buyers involved for those credits, part of that net zero criteria that the global G8 or G7 has put together from the Paris Accord. And we just create more transparency and trust because we're using a ledger that reduces due diligence and has data that isn't being manipulated, which happens far too often in the crediting world. And so this is really, really exciting. And to that tune, one of the large CPGs has committed. We actually transactioned about $27 million in ecological credits from emission reduction. In this case, it was methane avoidance from cows that was being measured. And again, I'm not saying whether I'm pro or against. I'm saying, hey, this is helping the producer. And if there's money to be had for the producer, that's going to continue to validate the good things that they're doing, both ecologically, animal welfare, food nutrition, and we can use our blockchain to that purpose, I'm all about it. And we're doing that. And so that's what EcoMint's all about. RWA, you heard me talk about this as a financial instrument, real world assets. Well, we have the platform, we've tokenized cows, so we're doing the digital version. People get confused, and questions that often come up are, hey, do I lose the title or bond to these real world assets? Well, we've thought about a lot of those mechanisms, the IP, covenant, warranties, titles, bonds that go into these real world assets. And so whether it's a tractor, whether it's land, when we create the digital version, we actually either bolt on what we call the IP passport that ensures that there is the right legalities around those titles and bonds, or we can do it without. In this case, the cows didn't need to have titles or bonds. A large portion of our livestock is actually owned by traditional financial mechanisms, banks, and we don't need to worry about the bonds or the titles changing. We can create the digital layer. We can actually have that be a benefit for the livestock handler, rancher, cattle stations, and the owner of those digital assets. And so it creates a whole new way that we can create these financial tools that benefit the buyer, the consumer, and the producer, no matter what they're producing, without having to wade into some of the rougher legalities there. And it's really, really exciting. So RWA, you're going to hear me talk about it quite a bit, real world asset tokenization. Livestock is just our beta testing platform. We did it with cows because we understand that very well, myself in particular from the cattle side. But this is just a blueprint that we can now use in any different vertical in agriculture. Cohema is a consultancy, and so I wasn't set out to say, hey, I need to build another consultancy because I know how. I love consultants, subject matter experts out there. We really put this on to say there's a lot of subject matter experts that really are coming alongside Grow and saying, we like what we're doing. We want to get involved. How do we support? Well, if you're a producer and you're already thinking about putting dollars into bringing a consultant in to help you with your operations, you could also put that same capital into becoming a Grow community member and then accessing our subject matter experts within our community, many of which are already ones that you know about or may have worked with. And potentially, it's a great opportunity for the consultant that you might be working with to say, hey, I'd like to work within the Grow ecosystem. You as a producer can join it, and then I can come in and provide all my subject expert knowledge base and be rewarded with Grow, and also integrate into the platform. So that's what Coquima is about. It's really that consultancy that is bringing together global mindsets and knowledge base for the benefit of producers, and allowing producers to think about their capital, traditional finance, and how to have that work for them in a more effective way. I kind of look at spending money on crop consultants and subject matter experts today as dead money if you're just staying in the traditional system. Where if you come in to Grow, and that's not a knock, I was a consultant, I'm not knocking all of that. There's wonderful people, but having your money work for you today in a more effective way and actually being part of a new economy is going to create that resiliency and the change we need. And then last but not least, the Nourish Mart. This tends to be where a lot of people start from the consumer base. It's our commerce platform. It's where you can actually shorten the distance between where you're sourcing your food, understanding the origin stories of the producers growing or raising your food that you want to purchase. You can use Grow tokens. You're not using the fiat system. But it's also moving into a B2B. So this is a great opportunity for producers that may have hay, they may have worm casting, maybe they've got collars on cattle, and that's a whole different conversation, but there's some great ag tech that can come in. And maybe there's other components of services or infrastructure that producers are looking for. Well, we've got a platform, a B2B platform, where producers can take those same Grow tokens and start to change the way that they spend those Grow tokens for their inputs or infrastructure that are going to help them on their operations. All of that diversifies your balance sheets, and that balance sheet is something that you can take anywhere in the traditional finance spectrum or otherwise. You can say, hey, I've diversified by using DeFi. I'm not as dependent on the traditional finance, and look at my ledger. It looks way better than it did before. That is real conversations, real bankable information, if you want to think about it that way, that your accountant, that your bank financer is going to look at and go, yeah, your operations is starting to improve simply because you've integrated this world we don't understand, but we can see that your financial ledger is changed, and that's great. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an understanding. Now we are at this wonderful spot. Grow doesn't have to continue building applications. We're at the next level here, and this is why we're really excited. It's called the integration step. We're now inviting ag and producers to think about how they can integrate into our blockchain. So if you're an agribusiness, you could actually come in, and I call it the Web3 mullet or the Grow mullet. You can plug your business into our blockchain and have all the Web3 or Grow party in the back end that you need, right? You've got the blockchain that's got that ledger that's immutable, that can bring value and benefit to your operations. You've got the Grow token, it comes in there. You've got the node infrastructure. You've got access to our ecosystem services, what we've already built. You've got this whole new network of producers and opportunity globally. So think locally, but also function globally, all because you've built on our Grow blockchain. And that's really, really exciting. We call it the integration step. You could be a vendor that you've got this idea and you want to build a blockchain into your business. Well, we can help you out with that. That's part of what Grow can do. And so the blockchain becomes really, really exciting and powerful because you probably have ideas I haven't even thought of. And producers might have their own ideas. They might be farming and then have that farm ingenuity and be like, hey, could we do something? Well, the blockchain might actually help conceptualize that, protect it, the IP and ideas, and get it to market in a far more streamlined way than you could find on the Web2 space, where you're not having to fight as hard. That's really, really exciting. And I certainly am looking forward to that day where we have more people integrating into our blockchain. One thing I am going to note, a question I have all the time is, what is a layer 2? What's a roll up? Why is layer 1 important? And so I want to just talk about that really quickly. So Grow is a layer 1, which is what's called a foundational layer in blockchain space. And it's really important to note that because layer 1s are where the financial world, where investors, where folks are looking to put and deploy capital into. Layer 2s are just mini blockchains built on somebody else's blockchain. That sounds really cool. And then when they started that, that was a really neat idea. What we have learned is that causes a lot of congestion. It causes a lot of data complexity. It causes a lot of issues in processing and provisioning data. And all that means is that they've had to turn on what we call a transactional fee that continues to increase because you're functioning with a layer 2. It often also means that layer 2, that mini blockchain, has to follow the governance structure and rules set by the foundational layer, which don't always mirror or equate to what that layer 2 is wanting to do. So it's really important to know, if you're doing your research on blockchains and you see a blockchain and they've got layer 2s and they're promoting, come build with us on a layer 2, great in theory, not great in execution, because it causes complexity and it just means that you're shelling out more decentralized finance just to transaction and be functioning there. Grow as a layer 1, we don't use layer 2s as integration. And right now we have no transactional fees. It's a benefit, won't necessarily stay like that forever. But we use what we call decentralized apps or decentralized blockchain. And we just do applications, much like, being able to run an application on your laptop. We go to the lowest common denominator for the amount of data that needs to be on chain and really reducing congestion. So it's called a TPV, speed of it's the indicator, the KPI of what we use to value the speed of how data transaction, and whether financial or otherwise. And it's the lowest common denominator. And so we're a very, 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 very fast blockchain being a layer 1. That's really important to know. The other thing is that when you integrate or you become a community member, the layer 1 governance structure, our decentralized governance framework, which I hope you've read or have found, or if not, go ask whoever invited you to this call to go read that. It sets that governance framework. That means there's no central entity controlling anything, that we've got multiple councils, we're fully decentralized, and it continues to be valuable for everyone, either integrating or the application's already built on our blockchain, which is very different from a lot of other blockchains that are out there. And then roll-ups. If you hear the term roll-up is somewhere between a layer 1 and a layer 2, and it's rolling components of the L1, L2 in a way to try to reduce some of that constraint complexity of data processing. It has some other caveats, but again, it minimizes what you can do. So roll-ups can be good in practicality if it's a very simple task or outcome that we're looking for. But if you're actually building a platform or a business that you need a blockchain backend or the Grow mullet, it doesn't function very well. And so we've chosen to not go down the roll-up route. So you've got L1s, you've got L2s and roll-ups, but really, when we start thinking about the benefits of blockchain, you want to be working with an L1. You want to be working with an L1 that's got capabilities, speed, limited transaction fees or nil to none, already proven use cases, and we've got all of that at Grow. So that's the message to continue to carry away to everyone.
Neil, quick question while you're on that topic. Do a lot of, why doesn't everyone just build a layer 1 then?
Yeah, so it's very hard to build layer 1s. It takes a lot of time, energy, capital, as well as needing a very, very good oracle. And so the oracle is really what allows, and part of the nodes that you run create that consensus layer. And so between an oracle, which is validating, saying the data is what the data indicates it is, and the consensus layer validating all that transaction, it's very hard to build. And not everyone goes out there and builds L1s. In fact, our core infrastructure for Grow and our sister chains that use the similar infrastructure, all the core infrastructure, there was somewhere around 10,000 to 11,000 Bitcoin used, financially. If you go back 5-6 years and look at the price of Bitcoin then, and then multiply that by 10,000 or 11,000, you'll start to see the value that was put into building our core foundational tech. It's a massive amount. We're talking multi-millions of dollars just to build a layer one, and then the ongoing costs to continue to shore up and hold that infrastructure before we even got to market.
And Neil, is there like a time frame that it typically takes to build a layer one, or is that a really impossible thing to say?
That's great. I mean, it can move fairly quickly, but usually it's a couple of years through prototyping and testing and getting out. You know, we took 2 to 3 years for some of our tech as we're building, but the visionary behind our smart node, which is a bit different than what a lot of blockchains use. They use multiple different nodes for different reasons. We have it all packed into one. That's 6-7 years in the making of development, iteration, building hardware that moved more into software, the coding languages, what we're doing, and leveraging some of the emerging technology that in the Web3 space is moving quickly and keeping up with that. All the security factors. So I say that our Grow ecosystem and our sister chains, you know, we've been 6, 7, 8 years in the making since inception of Vision. Grow itself took about 2.5 years to put our whole foundation before we even launched market.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Neil, one more question maybe before we finish up, unless I haven't seen any more come into the chat. If someone said to you, you know, what's in it for me to own a Grow node, what would your answer be?
What isn't in it for you? That's a great question. The starting spot really is understanding who's asking that question. So I always say we have 3 different audiences. You know, we've got consumers, we've got producers, and we've got the messy middle, which is processors and everyone in the supply chain. And I'm not saying that to discredit you or just being disparaging, just quantifying that third category there. So from a consumer side, you get to have an appreciating asset that is literally printing you a financial instrument where you can go feed your family more nutritious food and have less dependency on the fiat system. This can turn into utilizing more DeFi, supporting the agri-food market space in a way that you can't do in a traditional model, and really starting to build some different net worth outcomes that happen there because we're continuing to have that one tide that raises all ships. So from a consumer side, it's amazing. From a producer side, it's a greenfield opportunity. So not only do you come for the node and stay for the community, you've got this appreciating asset. You can use Grow tokens for infrastructure input as a way to settle transactions that actually are going to appreciate. So I use that case study of just settling 5 to 10% of your operation and Grow and do some modeling and see how that actually appreciates. We've also got the capability of using the node to kind of think about it as your portal where you can start to store your data off your farm operation. You can do this from a legacy standpoint. So I know a lot of producers that store a lot of their farm knowledge up here in the noggin. Well, how are you going to pass that on to the next generation that you want to invite back into agriculture? Well, we can take it and we can actually digitize that, whether it's on a Word document that we then process into the blockchain or Excel or dictation and video, voice notes. But you can actually store that where you have ownership over that. So you can pass that on to your heirs or to whoever is going to take over your land. And you can make sure that that knowledge base that you don't want to be falling into the wrong hands is protected. So you can build legacy. You can use that data to better understand your land. So the speed of which we can analyze that data that no one else has access to, so that you can have more data-driven decisions that are benefiting your land, is another reason and another benefit to own a node. And then lastly is the monetization. We can help you take that data, You can build a traceability program. You can monetize it in those ecological credits. You can use data to build RWA tokenized capabilities. And so you create all these new revenue streams simply by becoming a Grow community member and running a node and having that data, work for you. And so these are ongoing. Then you could, potentially start building in new value of ideas. Maybe you've got a farm innovative idea that you want to leverage blockchain for the same premise, safeguarding your IP and your data. But think about diversifying your balance sheet. This is what the node allows you to do. And then lastly, that commerce component in owning a node, in settling and running your financial instruments, taking uncontracted product or contracted product into our commerce platform. You can really start to trust and understand where your data is going as a rider along with your product. So think of a cow that may need a premium price because you have the data to say, hey, this was actually, we focused on the lignin and the O3, O6, omega-3, omega-6, and, how we finished it on carrots or on grass, whatever the case may be. Don't discredit finishing cows on carrots and do some research on that. It's amazing. But all of that is very important to safeguard. And so that node gives you all that opportunity. Plus, you can access this ecosystem services here. So if you want subject matter experts, you've got this great community of like-minded individuals that are really trying to shift the paradigm and conversations. The other component that it gives producers is access to what we call smart contracts. So we know today agriculture producers, they sign up to a lot of contracts. Those contracts are often written to be rewritten, and they benefit big ag, big conglomerates. And with smart contracts, you can actually start to create mechanisms where you benefit, you are in control. And because it's locked into the blockchain, it's not going to be rewritten without everyone's knowledge and awareness. And it also triggers automatic transaction. And when we think about DeFi and settling in Grow token in particular, it's instantaneous. There's no middleman bank fees in there. There's no holdbacks. There's no due diligence and we got to qualify where this transaction's coming from. It means that I in Canada can do business with you in Australia in a blink of an eye, and we can actually be functioning in a very different way and still being very beneficial. And there's less people in our back pockets taking valuable resources away from us. Call that proverbial economic resource. And just giving us more hope and prosperity. So those are all the reasons. And then the messy middle, much the same. Whether you're a processor, you can quantify why you're an SQF certified processing plant, cutting and packaging produce, let's say. Your boxes can have QR codes that actually indicate where the product came from if you're dealing with multiple different producers. All of this can be ledgered online. You can have ticketing for, let's say, grain. If you're going into a grain terminal, you can be a grain terminal and have all your ticketing systems on blockchain, really creating transparency for all the producers that have maybe forward sold or putting their grain into a condo in terminals that is connecting into the commodity system. We can actually settle in DeFi, so fast, instantaneous. You can do functional analysis where there's a lot of subjectivity in terms of how you grade your product when you're going into the supply chain. We can actually see how they're graded by leveraging data on a blockchain, so there's mutual respect there and on what that grade may look like. This is the same for beasts if you're working in the livestock side of life. Sire, dam, genetics, crossbreeding, all of that functions on blockchain much more effectively. We can have herd share programs. If you're in the messy middle and you're functioning with selling herd share programs out there, working with multiple different producers. All of that can be ledgered. Again, trust, transparency, and traceability of where the beasts are moving, how they're fed and raised, what portion of that animal is being owned by what buyer is very important. And again, that could be the supply chain that is buying that, the pack house, or it could be a consumer. And so it really offers a lot more functionality. And again, baked in functioning smart contracts. We call them smart contracts because they're really advantageous in the way that they have trigger points, create that financial instrument capability, and allow you more pace and efficiency, which is very important to the supply chain, and more capability. So those are all just scratching the surface, really, but those are all the really, really neat points of becoming a community member and helping us run the blockchain. So I want you to think about not just like owning a node and running it. That sounds kind of ambiguous to a lot of people. Helping us run the blockchain, having ownership in and having a stake in something that, has huge upside, that you have a voice in, and you're not just subscribing and hanging your hat in somebody else's instrument. You actually have a voice. You can sit down at the table and say, hey, this is working, this isn't. I have some ideas about what we can do here or there, and you gain that same benefit. The more you contribute, the more it benefits the ecosystem. The more others contribute, the more it benefits the ecosystem. And so this is it's much more than owning a piece of software. It truly is ownership in a new economy.
Yeah, so awesome. So good. Neil, do you mind if I just pop your Calendly link up in case anyone wants to book a call with you to talk a little bit more one-to-one about their specific situation?
Please do.
Let me just do that. So if you want to go ahead and book a call with Neil, just click on that green button and Neil's calendar will come up for you, and you can find a time where you can just have a one-to-one chat and understand your specific situation, or where you're at with Neil specifically, and ask him some more specific questions that are relevant to you. Super. Now, okay, I might stop our recording now so it doesn't get too long.